to this breath, by understanding that you're taking all the energy in those first three centers, how much energy does it make to create another life form? That's a lot of potential energy, yes? And instead of releasing it out, we want to draw it up into the brain. Are you with me still? Now, you have a bone down here at the base of your spine called your sacrum bone. Did you ever see it? It looks like an upside down triangle. You got it? And on the plateau of that sacrum bone, that upside down triangle, sits the spinal column. And those spinal vertebrae go right up into this ivory cavern called the skull. And it houses the most delicate system in the body, the central nervous system. And the central nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems in the body. It's the wires that run the machine, and here's the big storehouse of information and regulation. And all happens up here. Are you with me still? Now, inside this closed system, the brain makes fluid to bathe the brain and the spinal cord, and that fluid is called cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid has some functions. It creates buoyancy for the nervous system to kind of float. It has a protective measure if there's trauma to the brain or to the skull. The fluid protects it against its bony edges and kind of slushes around in there. It serves as a transport system to bring nutrients and neurotransmitters and hormones and chemicals to different parts of the nervous system. And its very substance enhances conductivity or electrical charges in the brain. So it's really important. You got it? Now that bone down here called your sacrum bone works with your skull. When you inhale and you take a breath, that bone called your sacrum bone kind of flexes back like this. And when you inhale, the sutures of your skull open up just a little bit. And when the sutures of your skull open up and the sacrum bone flexes back, that cerebrospinal fluid drains down because there's more volume. You with me? And when you just naturally exhale, the sacrum kind of flexes forward and the sutures close. And when that happens, it closes the system. And when the sacrum flexes forward, it propagates a little wave and it pushes the fluid up. So the mechanism of inhaling and exhaling kind of moves this cerebrospinal fluid very slowly. And it can start at the base of the spine. It can go all the way up to the brain, and there's 4 ventricles in the brain, 4 openings. It goes through all those different chambers, goes around the brain, comes back down. It takes about 12 hours for one molecule of cerebrospinal fluid to make that journey. So you flush your brain twice a day. You with me? Now, I looked this up, and if you look at cerebrospinal fluid, it's basically proteins and salts that are in solution. Now, if you take a protein molecule and you take a salt molecule and you drop it in a solution, they all of a sudden develop charges. Are you with me still? So cerebrospinal fluid has charged molecules in it. Now, what would happen if you blew all the air out of your nose all the way? When you blew all that air out of your nose, you locked down your perineum, the muscles you use to eliminate front and back, the muscles you use for intercourse. If you were to squeeze those muscles, pull your belly button to your spine, and lock your core right here and squeeze like that, if you were to do that, which way would that cerebrospinal fluid move? Up. And if you were to couple a very slow, steady breath with the intention of pulling that energy from these lower centers all the way up to that pineal gland in the back of your brain, and we'll talk about that in a second. If you could couple your breath with the contraction of these muscles, as you breathe and you squeeze, you start moving this cerebrospinal fluid up towards the brain. How many people understand? Now, Engineers and scientists in this audience and physicists will tell you if you take a charged molecule or charged molecules and you do this, when you accelerate a charged molecule, it creates an external field called an inductance field. And it moves right in a circular fashion in the direction of the movement of the charged molecules. Are you with me still? So if you moved several charged molecules all at once, that inductance field, as it moves, could literally draw energy from these centers up towards your brain. This breath is not a passive breath. This is a very engaging breath. And it takes a little passion, some presence, and the desire to want to have the experience. And it takes a little practice coordinating this one slow, steady breath with the contraction of these muscles that you use in other ways. And I'm asking you to coordinate it with the breath. And if you get a little passionate and you start doing it and you have a target, that pineal gland, one slow, steady breath, you're pulling that energy up, pulling up your perineum, pulling in your lower abdomen, locking down your core. And as you squeeze like this, as you draw the breath up, which way is that fluid going? And you're creating that field. You pull it up into your chest. When you get it up into your chest, your shoulders come down. You lock your entire torso, all these muscles, and you squeeze like that. You bring it through your throat. You straighten your spine. You finish your breath right on that pineal gland, right between the back of your throat and the back of your head. And that's your target. Are you with me still? And if you keep doing this and you start accelerating that fluid, that energy begins, as it moves, the energy begins to move up like that, and the sympathetic nervous system switches on. And once that sympathetic nervous system switches on, there's an arousal. And that energy is not going to be moving out. The sympathetic nervous system is going to merge with the parasympathetic nervous system, and that energy is going to be released up into the brain. Are you with me still? And there's a gate at the brain stem called the thalamic gate. And that gate opens wide up. And that energy moves right up to the brain. Now, once the energy makes it to the top of the head, all that energy that was stored in the body, the 95%, is now moving up towards the brain. And as the energy moves up towards the brain, you get a positive charge here and a negative charge here. And you have a positive charge here and a negative charge here. What do you have? A magnet. And all of a sudden, you start producing this external electromagnetic field. And that energy goes right up to the pineal gland, and it signals that pineal gland, and the brain goes into gamma brainwave patterns. And the person is feeling an awakening. They're feeling a euphoria. They're feeling a release of energy into their brain. Now, when they feel that feeling, what do you think they're going to say? Oh, I don't think I want any more of that. The person's going to say, I'm going to go get me some more of that. I like that feeling. And you're pulling that energy like drawing fluid up a straw right to your brain. Now listen closely. I looked this up. I didn't get on social media and say, does anybody know anything about the pineal gland? I didn't do that. And I did the research. And just like homing pigeons, just like all reptiles, just like all mammals, there's tiny little calcium carbonate crystals in the pineal gland that are stacked up on top of each other in the human being, rhombohedrons. And they're stacked up on top of each other. And the research says that it has piezoelectric properties. What does that mean? I looked it up. When you apply a mechanical stress to these crystals, the mechanical stress begins to create an electrical charge in the crystal. And the compression begins to polarize the ends of the crystal with a positive charge and a negative charge. And when you polarize the crystal with a positive charge and a negative charge, what do you have? A magnet. And all of a sudden, as you compress those crystals, the mechanical stress creates an electrical field. And that field actually expands until the crystals can't stretch any longer. And then the field reverses. And when the field reverses, the field actually exerts a pressure against the crystals again that causes the crystals to expand. And the next thing you know, you have a little radio receiver. How many people understand? And you switch on the brain's radio receiver, and now the brain can tune in to frequencies beyond the senses. And that is the mystical gland. And the research says it's a transducer. How do I know? I looked it up. I didn't go on social, I looked it up. Transducer, like a television antenna. That's what it said. Taking energy and information in one form and turning it into pictures and images, meaning. And that's why it's called the third eye, because you have an inner vision that's more real than the outer world. The brain now is picking up information from the field, and it's transducing it into profound imagery, a mystical, transcendental moment. And we do the breath. When you finish that breath, I'm going to ask you to finish it right on that pineal gland. That's your target. And I'm going to ask you to hold your breath. Now, this is not torture. I'm not asking you to hold your breath to see how long you can hold your breath. If you're thinking about how long you're holding your breath, you're not doing it. I want your attention as you hold your breath. I'm going to ask you to lift this up, pull this in, lock this down, straighten your spine, drop down, and pump and squeeze a little bit more. And I just want you to keep squeezing and pushing that fluid right up against that target there. And I'll say exhale, and then you feel. Then we go get it again. I don't feel like it is not going to do anything. I'm too old, nothing will happen. You got to leave that behind you. You got to get lost in the act. And when that energy moves, I have had it happen thousands of times. It is big. It's not like, ooh, I'm an energy worker. It's not like that. It's like, holy heck. It's a train that's moving. And it goes right up to the brain. And that energy is being released in the brain. And the brain goes into those gamma brainwave patterns. Very high gamma brainwave patterns. How many people understand?